It's kind of a running joke in my office that I always get the weirdest calls, and it's true. One of the more interesting ones I got was from a drunk guy who meant to call the cops and was trying to file a noise complaint about his own party. While some of my calls can be pretty strange, they're usually fairly tame. I've been pretty lucky because I haven't had too many disturbing or sad stories to tell from my years working as a 911 operator. If you're looking for something like that, I can point you to several of my colleagues because unfortunately, there's no shortage of those in this industry. The call that particularly sticks in my mind is one that I had about a year or two ago. I can honestly say that it's one of the most frightening experiences of my entire life, and I think it's gonna stick with me forever. It had actually been a fairly slow afternoon that day. I know it sounds kind of insensitive, but if you're not taking a call, this job can get pretty boring. I got stuck covering my friend's evening shift, and I didn't expect things to get more interesting. I was counting down the minutes until my shift ended when a call came through my line. I put the headset on and ran through the usual script. 911, what's your emergency? I asked. I think there's someone in my house. The voice sounded like it belonged to a young child. My heart sank. Calls from children were always the worst. We're trained to get as much information from each caller as possible. This makes it easier to more fully understand the situation, as well as figure out which emergency services we need to dispatch. What's your name, sweetie? I kept my voice calm and upbeat. There was no need in scaring them any further than they undoubtedly already were. Elizabeth, she said softly. I think she might have been crying. That's a beautiful name. Mine's Amelia. Even though I didn't show it, I was beginning to get nervous. This is very important. Can you tell me what's happening right now? The line was quiet for a moment, but then Elizabeth started talking. I think someone's in my house. Where are your parents? I asked. They're not home. I'm not sure where they are. I was pretty angry when I heard this. What kind of parent leaves a little girl home alone this late at night? Is there anyone else there with you? Yeah, I think they're looking for me, Elizabeth began, but her voice abruptly stopped at the very end of her sentence. Had it not been for her quiet, frightened breaths, I would have thought she, or whoever else was there, hung up. They said my name. She was definitely crying now. Where are you? I heard a door close. In my parents' closet. She spoke a little louder now, probably thinking that the intruder wouldn't be able to hear her from in there. I hoped she was right. I was glad that she knew to hide. A lot of kids freeze up in dangerous situations like this, especially if their parents or an older sibling aren't there. I asked for her address, which she gave to me. Elizabeth's house was in a fairly nice neighborhood in my area, and it wasn't far from the police station, which was very helpful. Elizabeth, just focus on my voice. I need you to try and relax. I'm sending the police to your house right now, and they should be there in about 5 minutes. Can you hold on until then? Even though I would usually try to get a little more information about the intruder, I always tend to err on the side of caution when children call 911. I'd much rather send someone and have it be a false alarm than risk their safety. Elizabeth did not answer my question, and it took her longer than I was comfortable with to respond. When she did, it was only one word. Listen. I heard the phone crackle as she brought it away from her ear and held it out in front of her. At first, I didn't hear anything, but as I focused on the background noise, I noticed a lot of whispering. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but it definitely sounded like it was coming from more than one person. I hoped the police would get there on time. As much as I help people with my job, and as many lives as I've saved, it's always so frustrating that I can't do anything myself other than wait and talk. Elizabeth's voice came out in hushed sobs. He's coming up here. Please help. The police are almost there. I need you to be quiet so he doesn't hear you. You're going to be okay, sweetie. I promise." She seemed to calm down a bit. Everything was quiet for a moment, save for the whispering, which was much louder now. I still didn't know what they were saying, but I was sure it was coming from multiple people. I could pick out at least 3 distinct voices. When I heard the door creak open through the phone, my heart leapt. Elizabeth screamed, and I knew that the intruders had found her. I was so scared for her, and I desperately hoped that someone would be there to help soon. "Are you okay? I need you to tell me what's going on." I was trying and failing to stop my voice from crackling. I couldn't let her know that I was afraid. "There's a man," Elizabeth whispered. "He has really long legs and a really big smile." My imagination was running away from me. I pictured this poor girl alone in the closet as an impossibly tall man towered over her. I heard another bang coming from somewhere in the house and someone yelling, "Police." Thank God. I could hear Elizabeth crying as the whispers intensified. I still didn't understand how she only saw one person. There had to have been more than 4. "He isn't touching the floor." The line cut off. I frantically tried to reestablish the connection, but no matter how many times I tried, I was met with silence on the other end. I would like to close with a message to any parents reading this. Please, please don't leave your young children home by themselves. I haven't heard anything about Elizabeth or her family in the years since this happened. The police only found the phone. So there's a database in my hometown of local 911 calls. I like to listen to them every so often, usually when I'm working or doing chores or whatever. They kind of satiate my morbid curiosity of what goes on around this shit town. Most time they're just ridiculous complaints made by whiny people, noise complaints, someone is lighting off fireworks, or they saw some mysterious figure entering a front door of a home. And no, someone entering their home in a black hoodie does not make them dangerous. Other times they're flat out hilarious. You have people calling in because they lost their shoes in a river, or someone's fat ass got stuck on the water slide at the pool downtown, or they're seeing a bunch of raccoons stealing food. You know, the type of ridiculous shit. However, there was a phone call that was archived years ago, about 2017, and it was weird. I'll let the call speak for itself. I also found some context to go along with it, and I'll include that too. This is a transcript of a 911 call from the residence of a Mary, located in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The call came in at 8:43 p.m., and responders were dispatched within 58 seconds. They arrived at the scene at 8:56. 911. Yeah, hello. Hello. I see something. Someone outside. Who do you see, ma'am? It's something out there. I think just standing. He's been out there for a long time. Help. Ma'am, can you tell me who you see? Do you have any details? Ma'am, I can't quite understand you. Yeah, sorry. I'm looking outside. He's kind of hard to see. He almost looks like a mannequin, if that makes sense. He's just standing there, not really moving. He looks naked, but it's dark. I can't really make him out. Please, just send someone over here. Please. Please. Don't worry, ma'am. We'll send someone out for you. What's your name? My name is Mary. I'm 17. I'm staying with my mom, but she's working late tonight. She won't be home about 11. Please send someone. Okay, sweetie. Don't worry. We've already sent a couple of officers to your location. They should be there soon. Please tell them to hurry. This guy is creeping me the fuck out. Is the man doing anything aside from standing there? No, he's been there for about 5 minutes now. Are all the doors locked in your home? Yeah, they are. Let me double check. I'm here, hon. The police will be there soon, okay? Ma'am, are you there? Fuck. Ma'am, is everything okay? He fucking moved. Ma'am, please tell me what's happening. The guy up there, he just moved closer to my house. He's just staring at my downstairs window. Help. Don't worry, sweetie. It shouldn't be much longer now for the police to arrive. Are you in a closed room? Yeah, I am. I'm in my room. My door's shut. I blocked the door with my nightstand. Good. Keep away from the window, and if you have a closet, go into it until the police arrive. All right, I can do that. Holy shit. Ma'am, are you in your closet? I can't see his face. It's like all fuzzy. His whole body is all blurry. Ma'am, please wait inside a safe place until the police arrive. Damn it. I'm going to die. I just know it. I'm gonna die. It's okay, hon. They're almost there. Wait a minute. He's gone. He's not down there anymore. Don't worry, sweetheart. The police are a block away. The lights in my house went out. It's okay. Hold tight. They were almost there. Are you okay? No. I'm looking outside. I don't see anything. Everything is dark. Is there a power outage in the neighborhood? Hold tight. Do you have any flashlights or a light on your phone you can use? Yeah, I do. Did you hear that? It's so loud. Ma'am, I'm afraid I can't hear anything. It's like locusts. It's so loud. It's coming from outside. What's going on? It's all right, sweetie. The police are there. You should be safe to come out now. I don't see any police lights. I don't see. Holy shit. What is it? Tell me what you see. Ma'am, are the officers at your location? Ma'am. There's fucking more of them outside. Ma'am, can you elaborate? There's more of them. There are like 20 out there. Help me. Where are the fucking police? What do you mean she isn't in there? You don't see anything on the property. Do you have the right address? Ma'am, they are at your location. Do you see any officers? I don't see any police. I just see those fucking people outside. They're not moving or anything. They're just staring at my house. It's so fucking dark out, and the buzzing is getting louder. There are so many of them. I don't know what's happening. Please help me. Please help me. Please help. Ma'am. A buzzing noise can be heard for an additional 13 minutes. However, the dispatcher denied hearing this buzzing when she was on the phone with Mary. Officers do not report any persons at the scene. The room of Mary was empty, with no trace of her or the phone where she made the call. Her mother is being questioned for any additional information about Mary's disappearance. Here we go. This is my darkest call for help. Before becoming an EMT, I was a team leader for a lifeline service. In the UK, these can be linked to smoke alarms. A call came through for a smoke alarm activation in a house roughly about 5 minutes away from our call center. All I could hear initially was the beeping of the smoke alarm. It was distorted because it was so loud. In the background, I heard a faint but panicked call for help, and what sounded like the service user desperately asking for water. I obviously called the fire service. I kept the call open and listened as a roaring sound gradually got louder and louder. I then could hear a cracking and popping sound, probably the windows. I'm not fully sure what I heard then, but it sounded like the man faintly screaming and making gurgling sounds. After several minutes of listening to this and repeating instructions for him to get outside, I could hear respirators and the beeping of the fire service's radios. At this point, I decided to leave the call center being run by my colleagues and drive to this house. I thought they must have rescued him, but I was in denial about what I actually heard. Once I arrived, the fire service told me that they still hadn't found anyone. About an hour later, I was informed that they'd found a body. This man was a wheelchair user. He was found right next to his wheelchair by the back door, locked inside the house. I had to go to a coroner's court to explain my involvement. This is where I learned he was a smoker who regularly lit his cigarettes with matches. He also used paraffin-based cream for his skin. It was believed he had lit a cigarette, dropped a match onto his knees, and accidentally set fire to himself. He had to be identified using his dental records. The cries for help and the noises of gurgling and screaming still haunt me to this day. I'm not sure if it was him gurgling or just something else making a similar sound, but I can't get the image of what it looked like out of my head. This was about 3 years ago now. I will never let myself forget this man. He taught me that you should never get emotionally invested in an incident. I've seen and dealt with equally as nasty a situation as an EMT, but thanks to this gentleman, I can let go of the emotional baggage that comes with ambulance work. This was painful to write. I'm a 911 dispatcher. About 5:30 one morning, I took a call from a lady saying she thought she was having a heart attack. After getting her address and all the normal questions, I ask her if she wants me to stay on the phone with her till the ambulance gets there. She declined, saying she still had to get dressed because the chest pain woke her up and she was still in her night clothes. So from the time I answered the call till the ambulance arrives is 17 minutes. The ambulance goes on scene and almost immediately calls for a deputy, saying the patient is deceased. Now, I just talked to the lady and she wasn't having a lot of difficulty breathing at the time of the call or anything, so I'm kind of shocked. I talked to the deputy and asked him because I'm thinking that she must have just died and the EMS crew didn't want to work on her because it was almost time to go home. The deputy states that she'd been dead for a couple of hours at least. So I wonder, was there initially someone else in the house who woke up to find her dead, called us pretending to be her and leave? Did someone come visit at 5:30 a.m., find her, call us saying they were her and leave? Did her ghost just want her body found? I'm clueless, but I've had this type of thing happen a handful of times in my 30+ years of dispatching. This story happened back when I was in college. I lived in my state's capital, going to a 4-year university that was named after said state, and living in an apartment. I had no car, but since the campus was just a 20-minute bus ride away, and about 60% of the residents in the 1,000+ unit complex were students at the college, the buses were fairly consistent and convenient. I had a bike, but mostly used the bus or I walked everywhere. My class schedule was a combination of early evening classes, with 1 or 2 early morning classes depending on the semester. This was common practice as many students had part-time jobs during the day. I wasn't much different. Between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, I had a part-time assistant's position at an accountant's office, mostly managing the 30-foot by 50-foot file storeroom they had. Because of the schedule, I often spend my weekends working on homework and projects, and would run errands like grocery shopping when I got out of class at 10 p.m. The city buses stopped at 11 p.m., so usually for errands it was a one-way trip. My roommate and I tried a few different arrangements, but he was absolutely horrible at knowing what to get. After he spent $150 of my money on groceries for the month and came home with $150 in booze, I decided to just handle the grocery shopping myself. This quickly became a routine on Wednesday because I would spend an extra 30 minutes after lecture looking over the professor's notes. This was for applied physics, and every little detail was helpful, so most of the students that were of the same major did the same. I would take the bus to a local competitor to Walmart, which was open 24 hours, do my shopping, then make the 3-mile walk home at around 11:30 while carrying groceries. Along the way, there wasn't much, just a few car dealerships, some apartments, and a few bars. It's at these bars that I would typically stop. They were around 2 miles into the trip, and often I would go in and get a drink. Since I was 18, I was allowed inside the bar, but I could not purchase alcohol. Fine with me. They had sodas too. After making this trip a few times, I started to pick a specific bar to stop at because the guys there were nice. No one messed with my groceries, and honestly, I wasn't objecting to the view. You see, the bar was a gay biker/leather bar. Yes, I'm gay, whatever. The bar was set up with an open courtyard in the front, with a large awning that opened the courtyard to the street and a great view of the river across the street. They had these thick plastic curtains that could be pulled across to cover the bar's interior during the weather, for events or the day. However, with the heat, these curtains were wide open, and fans were blowing non-stop to keep the space from becoming a sauna. On the night in question, it was a real horrendously warm and muggy May night, the kind of night where it feels like you're breathing water instead of air. I stopped at the bar and ordered my usual root beer. The bartender popped an IBC open for me, and I slowly drank it, letting myself cool down from the heat. I ordered 2 more and hung around almost 30 minutes, chatting with 2 guys inside the bar. It was Wednesday night, and the bar was pretty dead, with only 6 to 7 customers besides myself and the bartender. One of the guys I'm talking to is fairly straightforward, but I turn him down. It was already late for me, and I had class at 7 a.m. Plus, I could tell he'd been drinking fairly heavily, not something I find particularly attractive. I exit the bar with my 4 paper bags of groceries and start to walk down the street. I make it about 50 feet before I see bright red and blue lights around me, and a police cruiser whoops at me. I stop and turn around. A 30-something male police officer exits the car and asks me what's in the bags. I tell him just groceries and offer to show him the receipt. The police officer snatches the receipt from my hands, looks it over with his flashlight, then puts it in his pocket. I politely ask for it back and explain I need it to settle up the grocery bill with my roommate. He says it's evidence and then demands to inspect my groceries. I'm starting to get exasperated, but I set my bags down and allow him to look through them. I don't have anything perishable, and everything is either in a cardboard box or a plastic bag. The officer rifles through the bags, taking everything out and setting it on the sidewalk. At first, I thought he was just counting each item to match to the receipt. When he has the last few boxes, he pulls out a pocket knife and uses it to rip open a box of rice. "Hey, what are you doing?" I shout loudly. The police officer replies with the most matter-of-fact tone I've ever heard. "I'm searching them for drugs." I stood there blinking for half a minute while he proceeded to destroy the 5 boxes of rice, some mac and cheese boxes, and a bag of beans, before saying, "Why would you think there are drugs in sealed boxes of food?" The police officer ignores me, so I take out my phone and start taking pictures. He hears the shutter sound and demands I hand over my phone. I reply with, "No, I'm recording a crime, destruction of personal property." The police officer loses it. "Give me the phone," and he calls me a slur. He charges at me, grabs my shoulders, swings me around, and shoves me down on the hood of his car, sending my phone skittering into the street. He then proceeds to announce that I'm under arrest for transporting drugs, and that he is going to find the evidence wherever I've hidden it, followed with another slur. He then proceeds to pull my pants down, underwear and all. The next few actions happened so fast, my elbow rocketed backwards, smashing into his nose and shattering it. I then pull my pants up in time to turn and see him at his feet, pulling his gun. I reach out, grab his wrist mid-draw, pull his arm down and lunge behind him. His arm violently snaps, and he lets go of the gun. I then hurl it into the river. I turn around to see him screaming into the radio, calling for backup to deal with a fucking tweaker. I walked over to my phone, picked it up, and called 911. 911, please state the nature of your emergency. I've just been sexually assaulted by a cop, driving Unit 238 while at 1354 Birkin Street. He's calling for backup on his radio. I broke his shoulder while escaping his assault. He ripped down my pants in the middle of the street after destroying my personal property, which I have pictures of him destroying. His gun is now in the river. I know this call is being recorded, so it can be used in court, which it will be. Do you understand? The 911 operator is silent for 10 to 12 seconds, which I use to allow myself a few breaths. I understand, sir. Our protocol is to dispatch the officer sergeant to the scene. Do you see his badge number or name? I replied that I did not. However, there was another police car 4 to 5 blocks down the street, and with what little time was left, I wasn't going to get closer. I told her to send whomever was the most senior police officer on duty at the time, and that I was going to call a lawyer. I then hung up right as the second police car arrived, and a mid-50-something officer with a stereotypical police mustache got out and pulled his gun, telling me to freeze. I'd already set the phone to auto-dial, so I raised my hands to show I was unarmed, and then the officer lowered his gun and began to approach. Before he did, the phone was answered and I put it on speaker. "It's Luke. I'm at 1354 Birkin Street. I have just called to request the police chief to my location because an officer has sexually assaulted me. By now, the second police officer is within 5 feet of me, and his face turns as white as a sheet when he hears the voice that came out of my phone. I want that officer's name and badge number, and I want you to put him on the phone. I'm also on my way." The voice is clipped and very official, despite being well past midnight. I hand the phone to the police officer in front of me and motion for him to hand it to the first police officer. The second officer brings the phone to the first officer without question. The first is leaning against his cruiser, moaning about his arm and nose, and answers the phone with, "Who is this?" The voice on the phone calmly explains, "This is the district attorney. What is your name and badge number?" See, my grandfather was the chief of police for the city I grew up in, only 30 miles from the city I was in now, and he had regular events with everyone within law enforcement for the local departments. Everyone loved and respected him, and he reciprocated by being a mentor to many of them, all whom called him by his nickname, Muzz. One of them was a young ADA for the county, who was now the city DA. She had actually lived only a few properties away from my grandfather, and was a regular fixture at family events. By now, 2 more police cars are coming down the street, and the second officer is starting to look like he's going to mess his pants. Meanwhile, the first officer is explaining everything to the DA, who calmly listened to everything, then instructed them to stay there until she arrived. She ended the call with, "And anyone who touches Muzz's grandson before I get there won't have a job anymore." I stood around for 30 minutes while the police talked amongst each other about what had happened and took statements from the bartender and patrons of the bar. It turns out they all saw the whole thing. The chief of police arrived in his own vehicle, and he started to talk to the first officer, who was sitting in an ambulance. Moments later, the DA arrived. I grew up with this woman. She knew me, and I knew her. She took one look at the boxes of destroyed groceries on the ground in front of me, then marched up to the officer and demanded to know what search had been authorized. She had a look on her face that would have made a grizzly bear back down. The chief tried to explain that the officer had believed I had drugs in my possession and was searching my persons for them. She listened to this, then pointed to the police cruiser. Let's see what the dashcam shows. Turns out the cruiser had a 4-way dashcam, giving it a nearly 360-degree view of the vehicle's surroundings. It showed the cops staking out the bar for over 2 hours before I had arrived, immediately pulling up to me as I exited, and the whole search. The chief tries to explain that the officer had gotten tips about drug dealing at this bar, and that he often sees illicit activities here. When the camera showed the officer pull my pants down, she said, "That is sexual assault. I don't care if it's supposed to be a search, which was conducted improperly and extremely inappropriately. The officer is in the wrong. Anything done after the fact is self-defense." The chief tries to explain that the officer will be disciplined, but that my actions were excessive. He says the EMT thinks the officer's arm is broken and his shoulder is dislocated. She, however, replies with, "I don't care." She then turns on her heel and approaches me. "Are you okay?" I replied that I was fine, just tired and pissed that this guy would attack me. I asked why, and she said, "Let's ask him." We walk up to the officer, still in the ambulance, and I said, "I wasn't doing anything wrong. You saw the receipt. I was only carrying groceries." He clearly looks like he's been given some pain medication, because his face looks like he's about to giggle. But my question makes him look me straight in the face, and he says, "It's obvious you're gay. I've seen you go in that place with bags. You aren't very good at hiding what you're doing. That place only survives on party drugs, and I know they're dealing. You were just the obvious person to be taking the drugs to the school." I just looked at him stunned, and turned to walk back to my groceries and pack them into their bags. The DA then offered to drive me home. Along the way, she asked me, almost as a formality, if I wanted to press charges. I said I did, and asked her what I should do. She advised me that she would press charges against the officer on behalf of the county for the illegal search and the assault. I thanked her, and she said she would make it hurt. It turns out the bartender had recorded the whole thing on his smartphone, and he turned that over to the DA as well. Combined with the dashcam and the fact the whole search was completely founded in the officer's homophobic beliefs, the DA destroyed him in court, where he tried to fight that it was a legitimate search for drugs. The judge did not buy it, and neither did the police union, who dropped his legal counsel after the first part of the proceedings. In the end, he settled for 5 years in prison rather than risk a trial he would undoubtedly lose. The day after his sentencing, however, his reality got even worse. See, the state I lived in had been working on an anti-discrimination law, which included protections for gays and lesbians, and adopted it while he was on trial. Under the new law, automatic civil action was to be taken against him by the city because he had committed a crime based on a discriminatory act, while acting on behalf of the city. The city did file the suit, and guess who was there to meet him in the courtroom the day after he was sentenced? You guessed it, my grandfather's friend, the DA. I was sitting next to her as she watched him enter, and her face turned into the Cheshire Cat's, complete with the wide, toothy grin. I still remember how he looked, oh so scared to see her again. Once again, she destroyed him in court. The hearing was a massacre for any defense the officer could have made, and before the judge even got to see the footage from both the recordings, the officer's lawyer proposed a deal for a $50,000 punitive payment, plus legal fees and damages, and settled the case. I didn't care too much about the damages, as I would only get the cost of the destroyed groceries back. unless I filed my own civil suit. But I did make an arrangement with the DA to send a photo album of me spending the $25 in damages for the destroyed groceries on buying identical replacements, just so he would know that I had, in fact, purchased them at a grocery store. I even got the store clerk at the checkout to pose with me as she rung them up when I told her the story. The Trans-Allegheny Asylum, formerly known as Weston State Hospital, is a Kirkbride building that housed the mentally ill from 1864 to 1994. In 2007, it was privately purchased and has become a museum and historic location and ghost hunting spot. It has a more unpleasant and dark history that I've regaled to thousands of people, and it pains me to be an expert on the subject. In 2021, I retired from my position as a guide and ghost hunt event manager under severe burnout. After all that I've experienced there, it solidified in my mind that paranormal things that defy rational explanation do indeed happen, and certain phenomena are absolutely real. It's almost October, and I'm feeling a little spooky, so here are a couple of things I experienced in my time there. One evening, while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple of co-workers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were just kind of killing time, quietly observing the area. Light from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. In that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to hip walk through that light from left to right. I said something about it, and the three of us watched as an arm and hand moved into the light from the right side. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out of that window for someone outside. There was no one there. At that time, the realization that from the ground to the bottom of the window is like 7 feet didn't even occur to me. I will never forget the crisp, clear silhouette shape for as long as I live. We would run experiments with a spirit box. One person would use one with noise-canceling earbuds. All they're able to hear is the radio static and blips of a few random stations. When they hear a word or phrase, they are able to say it out loud. One evening, my coworker and I ran one of these experiments in a notorious room where a murder in 1987 took place. For 10 minutes, I sat and listened to nothing but radio static through the spirit box. No blips of radio, nothing except static. I was starting to get bored when I heard a woman's voice say, "Evil." So I spoke up and repeated the word, "Evil." Next thing I know, my coworker is shining her flashlight in my face to get my attention. I pull out the earbud, and she was practically frantically saying, "It's time to go, time to go." So we haul ass out of the room, down the hall, down the next hall to the center section before she would even tell me what happened. While I was hearing nothing but static, she said she kept hearing what sounded like someone shuffling their feet and walking around just outside the door. She spoke up and asked, "Whoever is out in the hallway, are they nice?" That's when I spoke out and said, "Evil." In the wee hours of the night, we figured it would be cool to see what would happen if we shut all the doors of the ward. One of the doors, as I was closing it, the knob twisted in my hand and was forcibly pulled closed. I stood there for several moments, opening and closing that door, trying to replicate what happened, trying to explain it. Finally, the person with me was like, "What the hell are you doing?" It was so weird. I'd never felt invisible force like that before. Another story. I had 3 people spend the night one night, and they had thermal imaging video. They set it up, pointing it down the hall where we could all watch it on a tablet. We thought it would be interesting to leave a device at the far end of the hall that would alarm if the field around it was disturbed. As one of the guys walked down the hall to put it there, we could see his form on thermal imaging, clearly human-shaped in colors, representing heat and warmth. When he walked by one of those doorways about a fourth of the way down the ward, the shape of a head, neck, shoulders, and upper body of a person, in colors indicating cooler temperatures, peeked out as he walked away. Like someone popped out of the room for a second as he walked by to check him out. I've never seen anything like it. I won't forget it, and I would give my left testicle for a copy of that footage. That happened a lot. A guest capturing something far out and not sending a copy to us. I'll end this with something that absolutely changed me and that I still don't understand. I remember the exact night and time of these occurrences. That's how profound and somewhat unsettling they were. June 3rd and June 4th of 2017, 3:40 a.m. June 3rd. After an hour or so of hearing a female's voice, as well as banging around, footsteps, literally running sounds on that hardwood floor towards us, I sat quietly on the floor with the group. I started to feel dizzy, lightheaded, and gross. I told myself it was my imagination and that I'd be fine. A few minutes later, I started to feel this intense burning sensation on my lower back, just to the right of my spine. Again, I told myself it was all just my imagination. The burning sensation kept amping up, getting worse and worse. I told myself that I didn't want to be that guy and say anything in front of these people, you know. Finally, it got to the point where I had to say something. I asked my coworker with us if there was anything there. She was like, "Oh my God." There, on my lower back, just to the right of my spine, was a mark that looked like a burn or an abrasion about 3 to 4 inches long and about 1 inch wide. Now, I'd seen other such claims made by visitors of scratch marks and the like, and the marks were always gone within an hour at most. I had visible marking on my back for almost a week. My nerves there, to this very day, often feel weird, sometimes chilled, sometimes like a skin soreness, especially when I think on the experience. June 4th, same part of the building, same time of night. I noticed that my voice recorder ran out of memory, so I'm holding it in my right hand, using my flashlight in my left so I could see what I was doing. Suddenly I feel a burning sensation on the underside of my right forearm. I did a "what the fuck" and shifted my flashlight to it. The person beside me and I watched as 3 welts began to appear down my arm. Needless to say, that shit blew my mind. It's one thing to see marks like that. It's a whole ass other to watch it as it happens on your own skin. Like the majority of instances I've heard about, those marks were gone within 10 to 15 minutes. No lasting effects. Scared would be the wrong word, but I have none to describe my frame of mind around those events. I took a week off from work after it to try and process it all, and was nervous being in that hallway for the rest of that summer. Like I said, I still don't know what to think or believe. I've got enough stories and experiences to probably fill a book, but I'll leave you with those for now. I will add a final note about how constantly poking around in the dark and talking about past true horrors of human experience day in and day out truly takes its toll, spiritually and emotionally. Since my resignation, my mental health and overall level of happiness has greatly improved. I used to tell people for a while afterwards that it felt like I'd gotten out of a toxic relationship with that place. Bear with me, the details are important, and I apologize for the length of this post. I work night shift at a 1920s mental hospital. Obviously, countless people have died here for various reasons: hangings, a murder/suicide, beatings, accidental overdose, electroshock therapy, and other stuff. There are 4 floors, with the 4th floor being the well-known hotspot for paranormal activity. Me being security, I have to check it out every once in a while. The fourth floor is essentially an extremely long hallway with housing units on both sides throughout. Each unit has a 5-inch thick steel door, and there's a window at the very end of the hall. They don't house patients due to the fact that the county took over a while before I started, and it's completely empty by the time third shift rolls around. The fourth floor is also the only floor in the entire complex that is completely off the ground due to the complex being built into a hill. It is also where the electroshock therapy took place a long time ago. The occurrence happened last week, Wednesday on third shift. I wanted to do a walk through the fourth floor that night around 3 a.m. for no other reason than I was feeling brave. I walk all the way down the fourth floor to the window. Eventually, as I got closer, I started seeing that the window obviously needs cleaning. When I got about 5 feet away, all of a sudden there was a handprint that would have been extremely noticeable from even 15 feet away. I looked at the handprint, turned around and said, "Nope," and I walked back down the hall. On my way back from the window, I peek into a side office area with my flashlight just to look. Nothing. I kept on going. After a couple of seconds, it sounded like someone was running up behind me, so I walked even faster because everything in my body said not to turn around. As I kept walking, I passed by a unit, and as I passed, I heard what sounded like someone punching the door. I put it up to paranoia due to the running I heard prior. That is until I passed another unit. Another loud thud as if someone punched the door. So at this point, I start speed walking down the hall, and while I am, I hear footsteps following mine. Mind you, these units are not connected at all, and the entire floor is completely empty. That's just one of my experiences. I've also been having dreams of a white skinny woman in a hospital gown that has black hair with bangs in her face. I always thought she was just a reoccurring person in my dreams, until I talked with one of the CNAs that worked tonight in the kids unit. I never brought her up to the CNA. We were just talking about ghosts, and she said that numerous people have said that they've seen the exact woman I just explained. I explained to the CNA in detail about how she looked in my dreams, and she just went pale with her mouth hung open. Supposedly, this ghost is extremely well known throughout the hospital by various people. People have seen her in mirrors, have been locked in bathrooms, and have seen her just walking around. But in my dreams, she always just appears or runs up to me, grabs me, and screams in my face. There was this one dream in particular where I woke up from a dream to wake up in my duplex's stairway. I walk down the stairs and walk into my bedroom. Once in my bedroom, I see my bed, my fiancée sleeping on her side of the bed, and myself sleeping. In front of my closet, I see that woman standing next to my body, just staring at me. I walk up to her and I get the courage to ask her who the hell she is. She looks at me, grabs me, screams into my face, and shoves me onto my body, which is when I officially woke up at 3:15 a.m. I have no clue who this woman is at all, but I still dream about her every now and then. Every single dream is in a different place, but she's just there. And this has been going on since I started working at my job. I worked in a dementia ward for a while. One of my most beloved little old ladies was fairly far into the disease. Every night she was worried that a man with a knife was trying to break into her window, or worse, a grotesque interdimensional spider. I tuck her in at night, and she would cry about either the man or the spider at the window. It was a huge, non-operating window overlooking a forest, and her room was immediately adjacent to the palliative room, where we moved people when they were close to death, so family could be with them in peace. I go look, sincerely out the window, and every time I tell her, "Carol, I see it. Good news though, it's actually a moose in the tree shadows. Certainly spooky looking, but harmless. Would have fooled me too." She was always relieved. I'd close the blinds and continue on, never actually seeing anything. One night I went to check on her in the night when she was sleeping. As I walked in, I saw the curtains moving. I figured she was up and fearfully staring out of the window, moving the curtains. As I rounded the corner, I quickly realized she was firmly tucked in as I had left her. I looked at the window, and in my peripheral on the exposed glass, something writhed in the corner of my eye. My heart skipped a beat. Carol flatly chirped, "You see it now too, huh?" I never doubted again that she was seeing something, and I couldn't bullshit my way out that time. She moved rooms shortly after that, thank God. This isn't my personal experience, but one of the old-timer MRI techs at a hospital I used to work for. They told me some wild stories. Apparently the old location of the MRI was very haunted. A woman would look out of the changing area as if to say, "Are you gonna take me back now?" and then just vanish. Everyone in that section of the hospital knew of her. The doors opened on their own and lights went out all the time. Rehab nurse here. I took care of a patient who was coughing late one night. I went into the room to check on her, and for some reason the room felt colder than most. From there, I asked her if she would like some cough medicine. I couldn't see her eyes, but only the reflection of the TV off of her glasses. She turned her head towards me and nodded in approval. Without thinking too much into it, I went and got her some PRN Tessalon for the cough and gave it to her. She was unusually quiet, but I can tell her breathing was somewhat labored, but she was able to get some sleep. A week or two later, she coded and went to the ICU, where she ended up passing. A few weeks go by, and one night it was me charging in my PCAs at the nurse's station just talking, and the call light goes off. Silence hits the nurse's station harder than a sledgehammer when everybody looks at what room was calling. Once I picked up the phone, I just heard a cheerful voice that said, "Thank you," and promptly hung up. I head to the room to cancel the call light and head back to the nurse's station. Everybody was spooked for the rest of the shift because it was the room that housed the patient I took care of, and the room was empty. I used to work in a nursing home as both a CNA and an LPN, and while nothing too crazy happened, there were definitely things that happened out of the ordinary. I remember one time after someone had died, I was cleaning up her body, and the door to the room swung wide open, even though it had been firmly latched. Nobody was there. It gave me the creeps. There were instances of furniture being moved, lights turning on and off by themselves, and toilets randomly flushing by themselves as well. I also remember I had one resident one night who asked me to make sure I closed the door to the closet that was on the end of her bed, and she told me that when it was open, that woman kept going in and out of it all night, and it kept her awake. This isn't really scary, but I was on a contract in a small facility towards the end of last year. We were on night duty, and uncanny things kept happening through the night. Hot water taps in parts of the hospital not frequented at night or completely decommissioned kept coming on at random points, and it was only that we'd hear the pipes that we realized and went to investigate. Then the annunciators over the nurse's station wouldn't stop going off for a solid 40 minutes. When they finally did, they froze at precisely 10:55 p.m. and stayed that way all night. The hospital was an old-fashioned U-shape with a dining room for patients and residents at the bottom of the U. In the early hours of the morning, I was sitting in the dining room and caught a glance out of the corner of my eye of a shorter woman with blonde hair, wearing blue surgical scrubs. She was standing next to the obs machine, facing the nurse's station as if she were talking to someone. When I looked directly, she was gone. The nurses at the facility had lost a few colleagues over the years to various causes. It was none of those who had their photos around the place. So one of my co-workers pulled up a group photo from about 10 years ago. The lady I saw was standing on the end, cropped blonde hair, glasses, small stature. They told me her name and said she used to work in the OT when it was running, and it died in an accident around 5 years ago. It's not the first thing I've had odd things happen, but definitely the most in a cluster. I had a 25-year-old patient with liver failure go into DIC in the ICU. She was a frequent flyer who would get esophageal and rectal bands, go home on a bender, and come back for more bands, and repeat. We managed to control the bleeding that day. The next morning she was my patient again and coded a few hours into the shift. Everyone ran into her room, and the ACTS protocol began. I was spiking bag after bag of blood products. As I spiked a bag of platelets, I looked straight ahead because I saw movement in the 5th floor windows in front of me. A solid black mass, darker than any earthly black color, like a void was floating there. It had no distinct shape, and the edges were wispy and undulating. I would estimate it was about 4 foot, no face, nothing. But when I looked right at it, I felt it knew I saw it. At a very fast speed, it zoomed down at a left angle and was out of sight. There were about 12 other people in the room, but nobody else saw it. She did die. I felt it was waiting to take her, and it was not a good feeling when I saw it. I had a resident in LTC who was forever speaking to herself. She preferred to stay in her room with a curtain around her bed most of the time. She was extremely hard of hearing and had sight issues. She was very sweet to all of us, and we just loved her. One night, one of the CNAs was doing a round and stopped outside of the door. The resident had her curtain completely around her bed, and the lights were off. She was whispering frantically. The CNA heard her say, "Yes, she has pink on." The CNA, who the resident still could not see or hear, was outside in the hall with a pink top on. This was her first round at 10 p.m. When the aide walked in and announced herself, the resident quickly shushed her. When she asked the resident what was wrong, the resident stared intently at her and pointed to the bathroom. "Be quiet. The man in the bathroom will hear you." The CNA swears she heard something move in there. I believe it. That area of the facility is called the Hole for a reason. We've also had several residents throughout the years complain about children running up the halls in the middle of the night, laughing. It's always in the same unit, near the same room. CNA here. Back when I worked in domiciliary care, I was visiting a patient with full-on dementia. He couldn't communicate at all. He would just lay in bed. His name was Andrew. Obviously, Andrew required 2 people to help turn him, change him, and whatnot. I walked into Andrew's room one morning, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man, at least 6 foot, and dressed in a black trench coat, black boots, and a black hat, standing over Andrew and just staring down at him. The moment I looked properly, the apparition had gone. I didn't get a sense of malice or anything. It was just observing him. My colleague, who came through 30 seconds later, said I looked white as a sheet. I don't believe in ghosts, but I can't explain that one. Besides maybe a bird flying past the window and casting a shadow that my brain misinterpreted or something. I'm an ICU nurse. A patient's son rang the hospital at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night, saying he was sure his dad was dying. His dad had had a severe stroke and was doing okay. Recovery would be difficult, but he wasn't expected to die and was pretty stable at the time. I was looking after him, and he was a lot of work because he would try to get up but couldn't walk, so he'd fallen a lot. The son really wanted to come in, even though it's way past visiting hours. But all bend the rules in a good cause. I figured, what the hell, it's a Saturday night. Come on in and sit with your dad. The patient died 2 minutes before the son walked in the door. It was like a switch was turned off. He just died. The last thing he said to me was, "Am I bothering anyone?" I told him of course not, even though he had some very frustrating behavior because of the stroke. The son just started crying and screaming. I knew it. How the hell he knew? We were all a bit freaked out. Okay, so I've got one for you. I was an aide at a nursing home in my hometown. The summer before starting college, we had a resident who was very kind. About a week after starting this aide gig, the residents started acting funny, not coming out of their room, staring at the walls, being hostile towards everybody. The one day I go to check in on them, and the resident is sobbing in their apartment. I ask what's wrong, and the resident said that the man in black keeps coming into their room and attacking them at night. After that, their hostility became worse, coming to a climax when EMS came to take them to a psych facility. They had a hidden pair of sharp scissors in their underwear. After that, their apartment came up for grabs. Another resident moved in, and wouldn't you know it, but after a few months, that resident experienced a man in black attacking them too. The resident also ended up going crazy and actually passed away in the room. It's a really scary coincidence. Now that's not the worst experience there. A few years before my senior year of college, I worked there again in the same position. One day, I was walking down one of the 2 hallways, checking in on residents about an hour before the end of my shift. I was gone from my desk for all of 5 minutes when I came back and found all the furniture in the common area was pushed up against one wall. There was a whole couch, love seat, multiple chairs, a small table, and 2 end tables. All of it had been moved. Now, I think it's highly unlikely that a resident, let alone a visitor, could have moved all that furniture so quickly. I don't know. It spooked the hell out of me. In 2012, I suffered a stroke that killed me. As I slipped away, I had felt an overwhelming peace come over me like I'd never felt before. Things went black, then I was ascending above and I saw the city below. Next to me, I heard a voice from this orb of vari-colored lights that also had a mist coming off of it. It was a woman's voice, and she was telling me how excited she was to finally be with her family and see her mom and dad again. I started to feel unsure and told her I wasn't supposed to be here. Suddenly, I was standing in an otherworldly place that was gorgeous. All the structures and buildings were made of what looked similar to marble, but it had an iridescent color between the marbling. The buildings were decorated with colorful stones, with gold embezzlements lining the buildings and glass fencing. I walked along the path with my arms crossed and holding to my body. I felt lost, and everyone around me was chattering happily with each other in these otherworldly clothes of satin-like linens. Some people held hands and were close and joyful with each other. This place was absolutely beautiful. I came upon an old man who was sitting near a tree and would seem to be teaching a class with people surrounding him. Some were sitting and others were standing. He called me over to join him. He was teaching the lessons of what life is supposed to be on Earth, what it was originally supposed to be, and how humans were supposed to be caring for the world and the inhabitants on it. But materialism had gotten in the way, among other things. I felt an overwhelming knowledge come over me as he continued to teach this class about the world, the universe, life and death. Everyone began to surround me, and the old man put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's not your time yet. You will know when it is." The people from the class all came in and held me in a circle, and I was suddenly back. I opened my eyes and breathed in. I was alive and back in my earthly body. This is how I came to believe in God and also reincarnation. I don't claim a religion because my beliefs are now a mix of things. Unfortunately, slowly, that knowledge that was instilled into me slipped away over the years. But I feel it in the back of my mind. To me, religion became several fingers pointing to the same being. I don't need a religion to dictate my relationship with God. If you're all wondering, I am 27 now and suffer residual effects that have disabled me, but I keep going. My body may not work properly, but my brain still does, and I focus on expanding my knowledge in various areas. Let me start this off by letting you know that I was living close to a metropolitan area for a little over a year before moving back to my tiny hometown. Before that, I was at college, other places, and whatnot, and I didn't interact with anyone from my hometown besides family for many years. I even deactivated Facebook for a few years. Anyway, fast forward to fall of 2020, I moved into a house in the tiny town. One chilly fall night, I decided it was the perfect night to chill and get inebriated off of my many glasses of wine. I was relaxing on the couch with my girlfriend when suddenly we heard someone knock on the front door. It was around midnight, so she immediately told me not to answer the door. I immediately got up to pull up the blinds on the glass portion of the door to see a meek-looking girl, probably younger than 20, standing in our porch with a blanket and a bag. I was shook by this because in a little town like this, there are literally no homeless people, and the town is so small, people usually have a support network when things go sour. I asked her what was going on, and she said she was homeless and needed a place to stay. My drunk self thought it was an amazing time to fulfill my need of helping the world by opening my front door to let her stay in the guest bedroom. My girlfriend immediately sat her down and was asking her questions, and her answers were pretty vague, thinking back. Eventually she told us she knocked on every door down the street to find a place to stay because she got into a fight with her mother, so she wasn't homeless. It's also odd to think a young girl would do that, considering the danger. Eventually, I found out that she went to the same private school that I went to from 1st to 6th grade, except the college extension of the same campus. We were kind of bonding on shit-talking the campus because it's this new age bullshit school run by boomers. But then she mentioned that she had a no-contact order for sitting at the same table as someone at the school. My drunk self did not register. No contact meant restraining order. So, we're talking, and then she says that she recognizes me from Facebook. I was alarmed, especially because I've never seen this girl before in my life, and we have an almost 10-year age gap. She told me it was because I posted a local rental on the Facebook home share. It was for my mom, who was a realtor without Facebook. Okay, that's reasonable. Small town. But then she tells me that she knows my mom. This is alarming because my mom and I have different last names, and she doesn't have social media or any way to connect us. Another thing my drunk self registered only the next morning. Fast forward to the morning, she says she's going to leave, and I ask her if she wants a ride home because it's cold out. As I drive down the street several miles, I realize she does live on the same street, but she also would have had to have passed at least 5 developments and many rows of houses to get to my house. Was I really the only one to answer the door? Or did she target my house? The next day, my girlfriend and I both discussed how odd that was and how many things didn't add up. Later in the day, we come back home from the store and we see the girl in front of our house again. I'm panicking because I'm horrible with confrontation, and my girlfriend said, "You let her into the house, you deal with it." She stays in the car and I ask the girl what's going on, and she asks us again if she can stay with us. I panicked and asked my girlfriend to come out of the car. My girlfriend told her that she didn't know if she had a gun or who she was, and she could only stay with us if she opened up to us about everything and why she's not going home. We sat her down in the kitchen and nicely grilled her only to get vague answers. To be honest, initially I was concerned it was an abuse situation, but it turns out it wasn't. At this point, she's in our house and we don't know how to get her out. By a stroke of luck, she says she's leaving to go to the dining hall and will come back later. We quickly tapped signs on both the front and back doors that read, "Landlord won't allow additional tenants," and continued to say, "Best to go back to your mom's." It's later in the evening and dark out at this point, and we hear banging on the front door. Then we hear banging on the side door, then the back door. Finally, it stops. We were upstairs and we knew it was her, so we just waited it out an hour. I walked downstairs to check because we're starving and wanted to use the kitchen downstairs. I decided to take literally one finger and slide one blind shade up from another to peek through the kitchen glass doors, and she's standing there facing me in the fucking pitch black on my back deck after an hour. I looked her dead in the eye, then turned around and went upstairs. Time passed, and eventually she left. When I opened the door, we noticed she took the handwritten notes. As the next day rolls by, everybody's mom and cousin is lecturing and laughing at me about opening the door to a stranger, which, to be honest, I would never do normally. But the whole thing wasn't sitting well with me, and I needed more information. I posted something on Facebook about it, and a boy I went to elementary with messaged me asking if it was, and quoted her name, because she had an obsession with him that led to a restraining order. He advised me that she's probably harmless and not to respond to her. She hasn't come back since, and I still have no clue why she truly showed up, or how she knew me. It cost me the purchase of a Ring security system, but it could have been worse. Fort Bragg, California is a small beach town northwest of Sacramento. It has kind of a Stephen King feel to it. You know what I mean. That misty, almost eerie small harbor town. But it's beautiful and a huge tourist attraction. You get people from all over the US that travel here. My fiance and I decided to drive up here after I'd taken some time off of work due to stress. It was a last-minute decision, and we packed up our bags in less than 10 minutes, grabbed our dog, and took off. If we wouldn't have had our dog with us, I'm pretty sure I would have lost her. I guess this is where I tell the story, right? It's our second day here right now, and we're staying at a motel that overlooks the ocean. You can see the fog roll in during the early hours of the morning, and watch the fishing boats leave the harbor to get their haul for the day. It really is a beautiful thing to see. We woke up early, and I was craving, and I mean craving, eggs and bacon. After getting dressed and deciding what spot to stuff our faces at, We left for our morning adventure. See, here's where I made my mistake. I was driving down the road, and it looked like the stop we crawled up to was a four-way stop sign. I guessed wrong, because when I pulled out and cut off a small Ford Ranger with a dinky trailer attached to it, and two old men driving, I realized a little too late that I'd cut them off. They threw their hands up and pointed at me, but Lily didn't even notice. I threw my hands up in a sorry, I'm just a dipshit tourist kind of way, and they just stared me down. It was a hillbilly standoff that George Strait would be proud of. I didn't think much of it and kept driving down the foggy two-lane road to get breakfast. I didn't even think to say anything to her about it. I never thought I'd see them again, and I didn't want her to complain about me not knowing how to drive. I was wrong though. I was wrong, and I'll never forget what happened next. We got back to the motel after our not-so-great but overly expensive breakfast. We cuddled up and talked about our plans for the future and what we wanted to do in life. But midway through our conversation, she realized that we were out of dog food to feed Bruce. I agreed to going up to the cute but creepy market and grabbing a bag of goodies, kissed her on the cheek, and jumped in the Navigator, left, and got about halfway to the store before I realized that I forgot my wallet on the nightstand. When I pulled back into the parking lot, I saw it. That same Ford Ranger with the janky trailer attached to it. The only difference was that Hank and Boomhauer weren't inside of it. I don't remember seeing them here last night, I thought. I walked up to our door while looking over my shoulder, wondering, what are the chances these douchebags are staying here? And then not 2 seconds later, my heart started beating faster. Our motel door was open, but barely cracked. It was open slightly to the point where you could see a sliver of light, but nothing more. I slowly pushed it open and looked inside, but I didn't see anything. Lily and Bruce were both gone. It was like they were never really there at all. My heart started racing, and I dropped my keys on the floor and ran outside, heart pounding in my chest faster than a jackhammer in New York. I didn't see the creepy old guys from the Ford truck or Lily outside. I was becoming angry and frantic by this point. Fuck, where are you guys at? I thought, before the screaming inside my head was cut off by the sound of familiar barking. I heard Bruce barking, and I ran. I ran faster than I ever have in my entire 28 years of life. I ran straight over to the front office where the sound was coming from, and that's when I saw her and our dog inside the office. She was crying, sitting on the floor sobbing uncontrollably, and his hair was standing straight up until he saw that it was me sprinting towards them. Lily got up and ran into my arms. Meanwhile, the clerk is on the phone and I'm wondering, what the fuck has happened in the 2 minutes I was gone? This is what happened told by her, and it makes my blood run cold. It turns out, as soon as I left, not 30 seconds went by and those inbred assholes knocked on the door. Lily opened it up thinking it was me forgetting my wallet, which I did, and they tried to force their way into the room saying, "You can thank your boy toy for what's coming to you," while grabbing her and covering her mouth. But those assholes didn't realize one thing, and that's that we had a dog in our back seat when I cut them off. Bruce jumped off the bed and didn't hesitate to bite the one grabbing her. They kicked him and tried to shake him off, but he wouldn't let go. After being bit and realizing that the noise would draw attention if they didn't leave, they ran off, and Lily was able to sprint to the front office and wait for help while Bruce followed suit. I wasn't there. I couldn't protect her. If we would have found a dog sitter and our plans weren't last minute, she could be gone right now. But my dog was there, and he did exactly what a good boy, no, the best boy would do. And for that, he is truly my best friend. If he wasn't there, what would have happened? Would she have been kidnapped, beaten, killed, all of the above? The craziest thing is that they haven't been caught yet. We filed all the reports with the local sheriff. I told him what happened earlier that morning, and the cop looked right at me and said, You're lucky your dog was there. If he wasn't and they got in there with her, you could have been filing a different report right now." I got tears in my eyes at that. I looked over at Lily and Bruce and thanked God that I rescued him from the pound, because in return, he rescued the love of my life when I couldn't. Hey everyone, this is more of an urban legend story than a true story, but they say there's truth in urban legends, don't they? Let me know what you think if this happened to you. I'm a psychiatrist by profession, and I'm often asked about my experience with patients, and when I tell people this experience, they always encourage me to share it with the web. And since this doesn't include a patient as such, I feel as if I can share it. I'm going to keep names, locations, and all personal information out of this. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible, too. I don't think I've had a stranger encounter than this one. There was a family of 3, a couple in their 60s and their son who was in his 30s, who'd moved into the neighborhood. They actually moved in next door. The son seemed to be a hikikomori. If you're unfamiliar with this term, it basically means socially withdrawn. It's an extreme avoidance of social contact. It seems to be more common in adolescent men. So the son was socially withdrawn and was seldom seen. The word got around the neighborhood and reached my ears that this was the case. I personally didn't even get a chance to meet him. I guess they moved to my area to try and get the son back in the groove, so to speak. I think it didn't work because no one ever saw him. He apparently didn't even leave his room anymore. I know this because I live next door. I could hear the mom yelling at her son to get up and come out of his room. I used to see her around the neighborhood, and she looked as if she was getting more and more tired every time I saw her. About half a year after they moved in, I got a knock at my door. I went and answered it to see the father from next door stood at the doorstep looking glum. He said, "Doctor, I want you to come to my house tomorrow night. I could really use your help." Although I had never done a private medical examination on a potential patient, I accepted. Not only would it improve my home life, his wife shouting at the son was irritating now and then. It would also help him and his family out, and despite the situation, I liked his wife and him. I agreed to come over the following night. So after work, I stopped by my neighbor's house and prepared myself to speak with the son. The mother and father welcomed me at the door and invited me inside. They led me upstairs, and the mother said, "Here it is." We were in front of what I guessed was the son's bedroom. The mother started shouting at her son, "Open the door," and stuff like that. The father then just opened the door. The mother yells at the son again as we go into the room. "How long have you been sleeping? Get up and do something with your day." She throws back the covers, and the sight I saw nearly made me hit the deck. There was a faceless mannequin lying in the bed. It had no clothes on it. The father then turned to me and said, "It's my wife I want to talk to you about. She cannot accept the loss of our son." This happened last summer. It was when I was headed back to the countryside to visit my grandparents. Our family usually went to see them in the summer. They lived way out in the middle of nowhere in a place in Japan called Saiyo in Hyogo Prefecture. I know it's not great to say this, but I didn't really look forward to summers, because every time I went to see my grandparents, I would always end up pretty much bored. All my friends were hanging out together, and I was just sat around reading the same books and watching boring daytime TV. I had a ton of time on my hands, but nothing to do with that time. My parents expected me to spend the day studying. That wasn't ever going to happen. On the day this experience took place, I was asked to go to the store to get something. I remember it was a very hot and humid day. Even though it was hot and not that nice to be outside, I decided I'd rather be outside than be inside. I had always been with my parents or grandparents, and I never really went anywhere by myself. I guess that I was old enough to be trusted to go around by myself that summer. So with that in mind, I thought that I would do a little exploring. I found a trail leading into the mountains. The trail was covered by trees, and it looked like it would be pretty cool and shady. I could get out of the heat without having to go home. I hadn't ever really looked around, so I thought this was my chance. The mountain trail seemed way more inviting than daytime TV. The trail wasn't tough. The ground was pretty even. I was slowly going up towards the mountain. I think that I'd been on the trail for about 10 minutes or so. It was pretty nice. I noticed that there were some houses dotted off to the side of the trail to the left. I couldn't believe that people lived out here in the mountains. I have to make it clear that this is literally in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing. The houses didn't even look like they had gas or electricity. They were more like shacks or cabins, come to think of it. I went further and further along the trail. I was pretty far into the woods now and quite high above sea level. I stopped in my tracks when I noticed something up ahead. There was some dirt ahead in the trail that looked a little out of place. I don't know if it's the best way to describe it, but if you've ever played video games on the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2, you might understand what I'm trying to get at. You know when the game wants you to notice an object or tile or something, they make it a slightly different shade or lighter so that it stands out. Well, that was what the dirt looked like to me. I stared at that patch of dirt. It was about 2 to 3 steps ahead of me. I thought about ignoring it and carrying on with my walk, but something about it seemed so out of place. It looked as if the soil had been dug up. I was curious. It really bothered me for some reason, but come to think of it, maybe I was so interested in it was because I was so bored that day. Let me tell you, I'm very glad I was bored that day. You'll understand shortly. I picked up a large stone in both hands and walked over to the out-of-place patch of dirt. I dropped the stone on the patch of dirt. I heard an unnatural sound. It sounded like the stone clattered with wood, then dropped. I knew instantly what the sound was. It was a pitfall trap. It was a shock, but I wasn't scared. I just assumed that it was some kids who had learned how to make it, having some fun. But I felt a chill go up my spine when I looked down into the hole. At the bottom of the hole were long, thin sticks of bamboo, cut into sharp points. They varied in height, some were long and some were short. There were a lot of those bamboo spikes down there. The hole was very deep too. I doubt that it was dug by neighborhood kids. What's chilling about the trap was the fact that there was no bait there. It didn't look like the purpose of the trap was to catch animals. Perhaps it was meant for humans. I turned on my heels and rushed out of there. I wanted to run, but I was scared that if I didn't look where I was going, then maybe I would step on one of those horrible traps. I got out of the woods safely, and I don't think I've ever been so happy to see my grandma and grandpa's house. I thought that daytime TV was better than being impaled at the bottom of a pitfall trap out in the woods, where no one would come to save me or hear me screaming. I think that's the closest I've come to death. I don't know what the purpose of the trap was. I was scared to tell my parents when I was that age, as I thought I would get into trouble for sneaking off. I have never been back to those woods.
Warning: this experience might not be appropriate for some viewers. Discretion is advised, as this one is pretty close to the bone. This happened when I was a newlywed. My husband and I went to visit his mother in his rural family home in Kyushu. He said that he was from a small town, but it was smaller than I ever imagined. Another reason we headed back to his hometown was because his father was in the hospital. My sister-in-law was a student, so she wasn't home to help, so that left his mother essentially home alone. and she didn't have a driver's license, so it made getting around the countryside very difficult. She could walk most places, and of course there were buses and taxis, but occasionally you just need a car, don't you? She needed a bunch of gardening supplies. We arrived in Kyushu on the Shinkansen. My husband would drive his mum around in his father's car. I was planning on going with them, but I suffer with anemia, and I almost collapsed on the train. When my mother-in-law saw me, she said that I looked pale, and she told me it would be better off if I stayed home. I didn't really mind that idea. My husband's room had been left the way it was since he graduated from high school. Same bed, same desk, etc. I got into bed and I shut my eyes. Now I should say that I'm a deep sleeper. I experienced and slept through the Great Hanshin earthquake, and I came out unscathed. Also, I have somehow slept through a 5.0 earthquake too. I had no idea it happened. I just turned on the TV in the evening and saw the news, and I was like, whoa, did that happen? It was truly shocking. So there I was, sleeping soundly on my husband's childhood bed for a while, I guess, before I began to feel slightly restless. I put it down to being asleep someplace different. You know, like when you miss the comforts of home, or you wake up in the middle of the night at a friend's place and you're confused and that initial thought is, where am I? It was a bit like that. I wasn't used to sleeping alone, so when I thought I sensed movement on the bed, I immediately thought that, my husband's back earlier than expected. I dreamily thought that he saw me sleeping, and he felt like joining me for a while. After a few moments, I felt like something was off. He was a little more ambitious, shall we say, with what he thought he could get away with at his parents' home. I was more than half awake at that point, and I knew something was wrong. I felt something moving beneath the covers, beneath my skirt. I felt a hand try to part my legs, and breath on my bare thighs. I opened my eyes, threw off the covers, and I saw that there was an old man on the bed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He saw that I was awake, and immediately tried to overpower me. I want to see what a city bitch's pussy looks like. That's what this guy said as he tried to grab at my clothing. At first I was speechless. I was in this stunned state. I couldn't believe it was happening. I couldn't scream right away, but then my brain kicked into gear. I leaned over to the bedside table, grabbed my phone, and dialed the number for the cops. I kicked at that old man with all my might, and he went toppling backwards off of the bed. I took my chance and I ran downstairs as fast as I could. I heard the old man cussing me, and saying something else disgusting up there as he got to his feet. I bolted out of the front door and I ran across the street, where I was immediately spotted by another old guy who was washing his car. I was screaming, it was all horrible. I screamed at the old man for help, and then I just began to cry. The wife of the guy who was washing his car came out and ushered me into their home to take refuge, while I waited for the police to arrive. While I was explaining the situation, my husband and mother-in-law returned home. As I was telling the police everything through tear-filled eyes and heavy sobs, the old man, the guy who got into bed with me at my mother-in-law's house, he came out of the house and just sauntered off down the street as if nothing happened. That didn't work out too well for him because he was instantly arrested. Now that my husband and his mother were back, they were able to tell me a few things about the old man, and it turned out he just lived up the street on the opposite side. He was living with his two 40-something-year-old sons who didn't work. He didn't work either. Apparently he had a young wife, but she doesn't live with him anymore. Wonder why, huh? Turned out that he was jealous of my husband and the life he had with me outside of the small town. He told the police that because I was from the city and wearing different clothing, I was, quote, glamorous, and I looked easy to him. He told the police that when he broke in, he had committed no crime. He was simply trying to ascertain if I was a hooker or not. Naturally, he was taken away in a police car, and we were planning on staying the night, but I didn't want to after that. I don't think I was being difficult by wanting to go home. Before leaving, my husband and his mother informed me that the old man was very important. He was a very important person in their town. I didn't care. What that man tried to do would have been irreversible. I was fully prepared to sue this man, but I was asked multiple times to find a more amicable resolution. They kept telling me that they wanted a peaceful end to the matter. I was aghast. It wasn't as simple as that. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't get them to see that. In the end, there was no apology, no settlement, and no punishment for the old man. And I cried myself to sleep that night. Is this just something that happens in small towns? God, I hope not.
This incident happened in the summer of 2015. I lived by myself in a nice house inside a small town. Low crime, but still the occasional shady fucker. Anyway, at work that day on a smoke break, I watched a dog get thrown from a moving vehicle. 4-lane city traffic during the start of rush hour. I ran right out there, scooped up his little ass, and booked it back to my workplace. He was not injured, amazingly. As a bleeding heart animal lover, I decided to take him home with me until I could figure out what to do with him. I have a large amount of cats, and always have. This was my first experience with a dog that I was solely responsible for. This guy was very shy. Head hung, tail tucked, jumpy, just looking at me like I was about to beat him. I was clueless on the subject of dog personalities and tendencies. I just knew they needed to be taken out frequently. His first night with me, we'd been out about 15 times, as I did not want him shitting in my house. I was having my final cigarette of the day on my porch around 10:30 p.m. The dog was on a lead, chilling under my chair as I smoked and poked about on Reddit. I see a man walking on the sidewalk that runs by my house. He kept glancing up at me before passing. Shortly after he passed my house, he stopped, turned on his heel, and approached. "Hey, can you tell me where 302 Church Street is?" he asked. I told him I would search the address on my phone, which, of course, he was taking a minute to pull up. He explained he didn't have a phone of his own and was attempting to get to a friend's house, taking small steps towards me the whole time. Finally, the address I summoned came up. It's exactly 2 blocks north of here, right on the southwest corner of the cross street, I told him, pointing in the direction. He kept his eyes locked on me, continuing to slowly move closer. The dog starts growling very softly at this point. I'd forgotten he was even there until now. "Mind if I take a look at the map?" He grinned sheepishly. "I'm bad with directions." I rose from my seat, pointing again. "It's truly just 2 blocks up this road. Just follow the road. 2 blocks. The house will be on your left," making it very clear that I wasn't going to just hand him my phone. "Well, can I call them? I need to let them know I'm coming," he said, still creeping closer, extending his hand. "No," I curtly replied. "How about text them?" Pushing forward still. "Dude, no." I started toward my door. Just let me see your phone." He was visibly becoming pissed off, clearly trying to contain it, and getting way too close to my porch. As a last-ditch effort of getting this guy to fuck off, I say, "You need to get the fuck out of my yard. My dog is protective. He will fuck you up." Hell, I didn't know the first thing about this dog, let alone whether he had the capacity to fuck someone up. I just hoped saying so would intimidate pushy phone guy. Like I had said the magic words, the dog springs into action, a la the wolf creature from the never-ending story. He emerges like a bullet from under the chair, growling, snarling, barking his little ass off. He jerks me damn near off the porch trying to get at this guy. He sounded and acted like an 80-pound attack dog, not a 40-pound timid beagle mix. I was afraid. I didn't know if the pup would turn on me. As stated previously, at the time I knew absolutely jack shit about dogs. He backed his hindquarters into my legs, almost nudging me to the door, still carrying on, eyes locked on the phone guy and baring his teeth. The phone guy holds up his hands and backs off, stammers something like, 2 blocks north, yeah?" and begins walking that way. I go inside, cut off my lights, and peek out the window at him. He glances at my house, assured I'm inside, turns, and begins walking the completely opposite direction I pointed him in. Icing on the cake, he pulls a phone from his pocket and raises it to his ear to make a call. The dog secured his place as a member of my family that night. He's incredibly protective of me and has frightened away another creep since this incident. He's attached at my hip and has made it known that he's grateful to be in a safe, loving home wherein he will never again become a projectile from a moving vehicle. His name is Hank, and I truly believe that night would have ended very poorly for me had he not been there. When I was younger, I lived in a small village of 1,200 people. Usually every year, there's a local town festival, and all the adults go for dinner and party at the town hall, where they perform some acting and make fun of the year that just passed. Usually this is in February, so it's snowy and dark pretty early. When this festival is on, absolutely all the 13 to 17-year-old girls are booked for babysitting. Me and my 2 friends went for a drive around the town, since you have to be 18 to go to this party. So we just drove around and giving people lifts to the party and earning some extra cash. We'd been driving for a couple of hours, and of course we knew where everyone lived, and some of the adults asked us to drive past their house to make sure everything is okay and give the parents some extra comfort. In one of the older neighborhoods in the town, there were low floodlights, so we just drove slowly, and one mother who we gave a lift to earlier lived there. She was a widow with 3 young children, 2, 4, and 8, if I recall correctly, and her niece was babysitting, who was 15. The time was around 10 p.m., and when we drove in this neighborhood, which is surrounded by hill and some cliffs, my friend swore that he saw something move in her garden. We thought little of it, and just said it was probably a cat or something. We kept driving to the other end of the town, but my friend in the back seat said that he had a bad feeling and wanted to drive back to her house and check if we could see some footprints in the snow. When we got back there, we parked the car and looked over the fence, and there were fairly new human footprints in the snow, all of them adult size. So we all looked at each other and decided to follow the trail. The trail went past all the bedrooms, but near every window, the footprint turned to the window like someone was trying to peek in. Eventually the trail ended on the street, and we lost it where the snowplow had been earlier in the night. We talked and decided if we should go get the mom from the party or ring the doorbell to check if everything was all right. Since none of the tracks led to the back door or the front door, we decided that 2 of us would stay hidden in the neighborhood and monitor the house, and the driver would drive to the police station and pick up the mom on the way back. That was a good call. Maybe 5 minutes after my friend left, we saw someone looking behind one of the garages a couple of houses down. He wasn't moving there. He was just sat there with a cigarette. We monitored from a distance since he couldn't see us. Then he stood up, looked around, and started to creep to the house where the mom lived, and he walked to the back door. Without thinking, me and my friend ran through the 2 gardens that were between where we were and the mom's house, so we could catch him trying to enter the back door. We arrived just in time. He was trying to open the door when we shouted at him, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he made a run for it, and we followed him. He ran down the street to get some speed ahead of us, but we were both athletics, so we were gaining on him. This was the most intense moment of our life. I remember the only thing I was thinking was not to slip and lose momentum. The end of the street was approaching, and the next turn would be 90 degrees to the right, so instead of slowing down, I jumped off the street so I could intercept him after he would lose speed by taking the turn. My calculation was wrong, and he managed to take the turn without losing much speed. I spent too much energy sprinting in feet-deep snow, and I knew I would have to slow down. I was still about 10 meters behind him, but my friend was closer and gaining on him. When my friend realized he could kick his feet and trip him, he did. He fell, and this was the quickest takedown ever. He smashed his head on the frozen ground and he was out. While we were catching our breath, he didn't move. We rolled him onto his back and he was breathing, but there was a shallow cracking noise. I was terrified. Millions of questions came to my head. Was he dying? What if this was just some relative doing a prank? Why did we chase him? Meanwhile, my friend checked his pocket. We found strong sedative and a broken camera. Luckily, the driver arrived minutes after with the mother and the police. Then the ambulance arrived and took him away. The day after, we were brought in for questioning in the police station. The chief told us that he was a known predator, and we for sure saved the day. And probably even more kids, since the tumble he took when he fell gave him bleeding in the brain, and he was not able to wipe his own ass anymore. We told him the story, and when my friend said he tripped him, the chief stopped typing and said, "Are you sure you tripped him? The way I see it, you three heroes caught a burglar in the act, and while he was running away, he fell and hit his head." He looked at us and nodded with a soft smile. But thinking back, this pervert must have planned this, knowing when the festival was, knowing that she was a single mom, picking out the house. Knowing that gives me the creeps. Why I love cats. Or well, one of the many reasons I love cats. I work about a mile from my house in a pretty small town. It's very easily accessible by walking, so I never drive. About half a year ago, I finished work around 1 a.m. Nobody is really out past 8 a.m. here, so the park I walked through was utterly deserted. I live in one of the safest countries in the world, so it's easy to forget just how vulnerable I still am as a small female. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point of my walk until I rounded the corner past some basketball courts near my house. I was still about 2 minutes away from home, and this stretch of my walk was completely dark. The moon was massive that night. While I had just welcomed its light at the beginning of my journey, in the absence of streetlights, it actually made things look pretty eerie. I'd walked this path hundreds of times, but tonight, something felt off. I'm not a fearful person in any sense of the word, but I was really on edge suddenly. Then I saw it, a van in the parking lot next to the courts, with its side door open. I picked up my pace and kept an eye on it. There are usually cars in the parking lot. I live in a tourist town, and backpackers often stay in their vehicles to save money. I'd never seen one with its door hanging open like that in the middle of the night, though. I was so focused on the van that I missed the man walking out from the trees near the courts, until he was a mere 30 feet behind me. He was walking fast, and there was little doubt that he was heading straight towards me. I was at a loss for what my next action should be. Screaming wouldn't do much. I was still too far away from any residences. I usually carry a glass water bottle with me for protection, but I'd left it at work that night. My phone was dead. Everything I knew better than to do, I'd done. And as stupid as I feel writing this, I hesitated running on the off chance that he didn't mean to act sketchy. I've moved past this mindset overall, but there's still this strong part of me that balks at the prospect of making someone feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. I also hate showing men that I feel scared of them, because even if they hurt me, I'd rather not give them any satisfaction of seeing my fear. I also knew I couldn't outrun him. I also overthink everything. I saw a little dark blur darting across the library parking lot at the back of the courts. It didn't even register to me what it was. The whole situation was so unreal. The guy was behind me now, and judging by his footsteps, he hadn't veered course. I quickened my pace, felt out my keys in my purse, and slipped them in between my fingers. I heard a slight jingling noise, and everything suddenly made sense. The blur was Apollo, the large black cat that often walked me home on the stretch after the park. Tonight, he was doing that weird cat run where they get really low to the ground with their ears back. I had an impression that he was angry, but he was moving too fast for me to see his face properly as he rushed past me. I kept walking, but the heavy footsteps were retreating now. I didn't dare look back and kept moving forward quickly. Apollo was suddenly by my side, still staying low to the ground and stopping every few feet to look behind him and hiss. Then he would do that weird cat run to catch up to me. He walked the whole way home with me, as he'd done so many times, but I'd never seen him act like that. As we neared my gate, he visibly relaxed and flopped onto his back. I coaxed him inside the gate before giving him some massive hugs and some head bumps. I stopped walking home by myself at night and still saw my sweet little cat friend often. I never saw him behave that way again, though. Apollo moved away 3 months ago. I still miss my little buddy and often think about how strange that night was. I wish I'd turned around to see him chase the guy off. I've heard so many stories about dogs protecting people, but rarely about cats. My own little girl would never do anything like what Apollo did. Parking lot creeper, let's not meet. Apollo, I hope to meet you again. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I want to give a special mention to Jay Nightmares for sourcing and translating some of these stories from Japanese. Check out his channel for more stories you haven't heard before. I'll put the link to his channel in the description. If you have a scary story you would like me to read in an upcoming video, this is one way to help me guarantee variety in the stories I share. You can email me or post it to my subreddit. I'll drop the details in the video description. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members who now have early access to ad-free videos as well as other behind-the-scenes content. Thank you to Mary Wright, Callie Townsend, M, Deshaun Edmondson, Kimmy Love, Wendy Maris, Confessions of a Cleaner, Megan Abrams, Miss Tycoon, Stephen Sloan, Christina Myway, Ashley Bray, Madisa Felter, Danielle, Tina Marie Heckman, Amal Garner, Lisa Radford, Deborah Malaise, Connie Sue, Taya Adwell, Diana Johnston, Vampy Debs, Jasmine Davis, Erica Asir, Fox Mulder, Ram Beltran, Tina, Nick Bigdowski, Sarah C.H., Neil Kavanaugh, Tiara Sanders, Timothy Stratton, Jennifer Jenkins, Lloyd Rash, Maribel DeLuna, Michael O'Malley, Marissa, Kuro, Amber Hobbs, King Slim, Justin Beast Gillespie, Joy Dana, Jay Bardle, Anissa, Stephanie McLaren, Lumini Cami, Skincrawler, Adiara, Bella Plays 2006, Michelle Welchman, Dana B., Lisa McDonald, Clarice Scott, Madison C., Wasps Sting, Jennifer J., Ashley, Lilypad, Lee, Taya, Wyatt, Gina, Laura, JK06, Fenrizio, Donna, Joey, Big GSC, Tanya, Spaghetti YOLO King, Matthew, October Gypsy, Lisa, Ali, Thomas, Build With Me, Letitia, Fran, Debs, Insomnicats, Stephanie, Summer, Rebecca, Tyara, This Bad Kitty, Your Pappy's Dilly, Lainey, Tripping Balls Through History, Samantha, Erica, Alyssa, Tracy, Killian's Place, April, James Arterburn, Jen, Joy, Handout, Pegasus Genesis, Karen Keating, V. Berry, LJ, Fiona X Fox, Scott, I Like Booty, Monica Level Ace, Chris and Donna, Holly Spry, Kimber, Jasmine, Sanatix, Heather Haven, Kitty Cat Luna 2, ADHD Aurora, Janice, Cinderella Baby, Borderline Betty, Lady Draco, Erica Nicole, Snowball Rathena, Melanie, The Honeybee 987, Pretty Girl 215, Ryan, Brooke, Wendy, Crafty Cal, Tina, Dina, Vampy Debs, Patricia, Amber, Krista, Brenda, Absinthe Alice, Christy, Kay, Spider's Web, Ooh La La Andrea, Sue, Monique, Sean Gorman, Emma Lisa, Sigma Cube X, Greg, Chelsea, Amanda Jane, Sam, Zeb Tepe, Sarah C, Austin, Tegan, Lil Smart, Jenny, Gabrielle, Fire 05, Sarah P, James Gargano, Gemma Allen, Monica Level Ace, and Alex. I hope you're doing well, guys. I'll see you all on the next one.